Greetings and welcome to our long-awaited Jim Lee tribute event inspired by, yes, the Jim Lee Tribute Edition magazine from 1996. Now, normally tributes are for people whose careers have ended or lives have ended, but at this point in time, it feels like Jim Lee was on top of the world and frankly, just getting started really for where his journey was going to take him. But it just feels like from Marvel to Image to DC, he truly has left his mark on the biggest publishers and most importantly, the fans to this day. With us tonight, first up, we have Christopher from worldofwildstorm.com.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate getting my feet wet with this podcast here. This is the first one I've done. And I have my copy of the magazine here too, although it's not going to show up.
It's always hard. Yeah, it's a ghost copy. Oh.
It's here.
And then, of course, returning a recent guest on the podcast, we have Andrew. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for asking me back. I have my copy too.
Look at it. Everybody's ready to roll. This is great. And we also have Matt. Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Hold up your copy. Oh, wait. It's okay. No pressure.
I have it, but I didn't have time to dig it out. I just found out about this event, so I have it somewhere.
But we're
really quick, I do have the Jim Lee Millennium Edition though from Wizard.
Oh.
Do you have this?
Yes.
Nice. We've been meaning to add that to the archives. We don't have that yet because a little pricey.
And some matching artwork here with that.
Cool. All right. Well, so here is the thing. As we get started here, I just want to mention, so Jim Lee was not 100% an overnight success story, although he did move pretty fast into the spotlight. It feels like he definitely paid his dues. One thing I wanted to mention, so in the preface to this Tribute Edition magazine, famed writer of Starman and many other things, James Robinson, actually talks about his first introduction to Jim Lee was on Alpha Flight, where he was doing pencils, he was doing interiors, and then just started doing covers for a while. And as Robinson explains, I thought this was interesting. Quote, Matt Wagner has a theory that an artist has to work through about 4 issues worth of crap before he finds himself. Well, these issues certainly weren't crap. So either Jim had his purging bowel movement on, on work even earlier than I'm aware of, or he came into the business far more assured than anyone has a right to. And so, yeah, certainly I thought that was an interesting way to put it. Very colorful. But also there's the concept there that, yeah, Jim Lee, if you read interviews, you hear interviews with him, you will tell you he was always drawing, just he loved to draw. So certainly he had the practice, he had put the hours in. But I want to ask you guys, just like James Robinson here was, introducing us to how he found out about who Jim Lee was and what he was noticing. What was your first introduction to the art of Jim Lee? Chris, you want to kick us off there, Christopher?
Yeah. So, like many people, I kind of got into comics around the late 80s, early 90s. And what had happened was there was a string of superhero movies that had come out. We got Batman in 1989, and then we got Dick Tracy, and then we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then in 1991 we had The Rocketeer. And I was kind of at that age where I realized, hey, these all have something in common. They're not just made for the screen. These were original properties that were put into comic form first. And so with that in mind, my friend and I went to the comic book store, like, let's see what's available. I didn't know I was going to walk away with Jim Lee X-Men. But that's where I wound up, and it jumped off the shelf. There was nothing else like it at the time, and I was completely immersed in that world.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. That's so cool that it started with the movies and it moved you into the comic book form. We were talking before we got started. We wish that was the case with all the people flooding into theaters for superhero movies.
Yeah, and I think the limitations of where the special effects were at that time and the pacing and the storytelling was much different than we see today. So, comic books really had an edge up where, not everything was possible on the screen, but in comic books, you could do absolutely anything. That was the drive for me to really get into that once I saw it.
That's great. Matt, how about you?
I don't remember exactly when I first heard of Jim Lee. I got into comics right after the Image guys left Marvel. And the first 2 characters I was really into was Punisher and Spider-Man. But when I saw the X-Men animated series, that really hooked me on X-Men. And then I started picking up X-Men stuff. And I guess at some point I must have picked up some Jim Lee X-Men back issues. And I was hooked at that point. He was definitely my favorite artist through the 90s.
Yeah, so we got one guy
But
starting with the movies, one guy starting with the cartoon. I like where
yeah.
this is going. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I was always an X-Men kid, like as much as you could be in the. So I was born in '81, so as much as you could be, like around, in the late '80s, early '90s, where like you don't know about going to comic book stores and stuff when you're a kid, and then but I remember being like, Jim Lee was the first artist that I could recognize and be like, that's Jim Lee. So like, not Jack Kirby, not John Romita Jr., like not, any of these other artists who have very distinct styles. I was like, Jim Lee, that's the guy. And I think it was because of X-Men #1, and all the issues he'd done on Uncanny before then. It's just so iconic. Like his imagery is so, it's just seared. That cover to X-Men #1 is just seared in your brain. Whether it doesn't matter which version of the cover it is, because there's 5 panels to it, but I mean, like his Colossus is my Colossus, his Cyclops is my Cyclops. So and then I followed him over to Image, and I just waited with bated breath for everything Wildstorm. So
that's great. Yeah, I love it. So I'll say for me, it was definitely a situation where I was like getting interested in comics. I had bought my first comics, but I wasn't hardcore into the hobby. And then I remember there was a friend's brother, or I should say my friend, who was like a brother to me. I just hung out with him all the time, but he had kind of kept his collecting habit a secret from me. I didn't know about it. So I walk in his room one day and he has a stack, and it has like Todd McFarlane Hulk and all these different things in there. And then I saw this cover right here, Uncanny X-Men 268. And I was just like, what is this? Like, who is drawing this stuff, and what are these stories in here? And so from that point on, I was just like, I'm gonna pay attention to Jim Lee. Okay. And then shortly thereafter we got X-Men #1 and all those other things. But it was a situation for me where I was just like, okay, this is somebody that you want to pay attention to. Like you say, striking, didn't look like anybody else, even though as you kind of explore his influences, you say, oh, okay, I see a little Barry Windsor Smith, I see a little bit of this, I see a little bit of that. But now I'm curious, there is another anecdote that Robinson shares here that kind of leads into another discussion that I want to have, because he says, I have a friend whose brother attended college with Jim. So I love that. This is kind of a secondhand telling. And he said, what did he say? He once said that Jim had 2 loves then, poker and X-Men. He was always reading them, and when not doing that, he was drawing them. I guess Jim had his eye on the prize all along, and then, given the chance to run with it, gave it all he had. The rest is history. So there it is: poker, X-Men, Jim Lee, the college years. But the juxtaposition of gambling and reading comics with Jim Lee is perfect to me, because, like, from my point of view, when I think about Jim Lee, he feels like he's always had a poker face throughout his career, right? There's not a whole lot of controversy attached to him. When we're reading Wizard for the podcast, there are not outrageous quotes. You're like, can you believe Jim Lee said this? Like so many of the other Image founders and top artists of the day. And so he says about this persona that has graced him, quote, I just consider myself a normal guy. That's just the way I was raised. There are people who say Jim Lee is a savvy guy, and I think they're saying that because there are so many unsavvy people in the industry. Personally, I don't have any interest in getting involved in long, drawn out debates that break down into name calling and childish antics.
I wonder who that was directed at.
Yeah. But so again, he had a certain demeanor about him. He seemed to be playing it cool. Do you guys have a recollection of some of the earliest ways that you found out about Jim Lee, the person? We saw the art, but then he became very, very public pretty quickly once he was popular. So was it on video? Was it articles in magazines? Was it like, do you remember seeing a photo of him? Like, is there a first impression of Jim Lee that you can recall?
I'm sure it must have been through Wizard because that's really the only place that I saw what comic book creators looked like. I don't remember there being any other place where I could even see that. Like they were just names on paper for a while when I first got into comics, but then I started getting into Wizard, and then I finally really like I understood what a comic creator is. Like there are people making this stuff. I didn't really make that connection when I was like really little, but it must have been through Wizard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jim was definitely all over Wizard, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he was tight with Gareb. They were good buddies and business buddies as well. Yeah, helping one hand, you know, helping the other. But how about for you, Chris?
There's a great VHS series, and you've probably seen it on YouTube. I think it's called Comic Book Greats.
Yes.
With Stan Lee, and there's a few different versions of that, but the one with Jim Lee is just fantastic, and you really get a feel that this guy just he's very humble about himself, even though he's one of the biggest names in comics and has been one of the biggest names in comics forever. And just, you know, the way he conducts himself was very it kind of was kind of a gut punch to me because it wasn't what I expected. I really thought, you know, he was going to be more of the way like, you know, Todd or Rob kind of act, where they put on this persona of like, hey, I'm the guy in charge here. And Jim kind of is more action oriented and very humble when being vocal about himself. So that was kind of the juxtaposition of that I thought was very interesting when I first realized that.
Yeah, that's a fascinating series of tapes. I love those.
Yes.
How about you, Andrew?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly the first time I saw him, but definitely that Comic Book Greats video. I remember renting it from a library and being like, "What?" Like, is it like? I mean, you couldn't find that at like Blockbuster. Like, that's the only place that those tapes existed was the library. But I knew who he was. I knew that he was somebody that like I was into his work before I rented it. And that just kind of solidified it. But I do think he is pretty shrewd actually. Like when he was mentioning he's a poker player, I'm like, yeah, like I think he is the kind of guy that like he's very humble, but I think he knows what he's doing. And he's very good at like playing the odds. Like I think you know, when you listen to Rob's podcast, you know, he talks about like there was, you know, Wildstorm was maybe going to get bought by Marvel, and then he was smart enough to be like, oh, Marvel's a sinking ship. Let's just take this party over to DC, you know? And so like, I do think that there is, that he might not be comfortable with that, with the poker tag, but I see it in what he does.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, what's interesting is, you know, we're mentioning these videos, and I first saw him in a video, but it was a very different presentation because I recall these X-Men videos that came with Pizza Hut kids meals. And
Yeah.
so like Jim, you know, is featured there briefly. And I remember how cool he looked with his, you know, his Malcolm X hat. He was always wearing the Malcolm X hat.
Always wearing the Welcome
Oh,
X
yeah.
I didn't make the connection until years later. I was like, oh, it's not because everybody was wearing Malcolm X hats at the time. It's because he worked on X-Men. I get it.
Yep.
So anyway, but yeah, so I always found him to just be so you know, yeah, just reserved and laid back, but at the same time just so cool, right? He always seemed to like, he must have like a million jokes going on in his brain. He only let out a couple of them, you know, that type of thing.
Well, he's got 9 kids, so he's got, you know, dad jokes galore. And if you ever tune into his Twitch stream, you get a bunch of them each time.
I also wanted to bring up this, which I got recently from one of our listeners. This is
Yeah.
this Hero TV Jim Lee situation, which is very fun because they interview him in his office, and you can see in the background he's got all these action figures. He has like He-Man figures and all these different things I didn't expect to see in Jim Lee's office. So here's the thing though, like just getting into the issue briefly here. So obviously on the cover, right, we have Jim Lee drawing Fairchild burying Grunge from Gen 13 in the sand, and then we have all of a sudden Ben Grimm is here with his surfboard in the background. And so I find it interesting that with a Jim Lee tribute, you're mixing the universes, right? You got Wildstorm characters with Marvel character. You'll recall with issue 10 of Wizard, when Rob Liefeld put Shaft and Cable on the cover together,
Right.
that was a no-no. And
Yeah.
Marvel was not okay with that. They said it could never be shown again. So I just think it's kind of interesting that, you know, it depends on how the relationship is.
What a difference 4 years makes, you know?
Oh, yes.
And also, like, Jim plays ball. Like, that's the other thing. Like, Rob is a rock star, and like he wants to like do what he wants to do. Sometimes it'll fall in line with publishers' agendas, but like Jim is a go along to get along kind of guy, you know?
Yeah. He knows how to get what he wants, not by throwing a fit. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to bring up here is just we've shared this on social media before, but that cover was eventually used for a Brazilian edition of
Oh.
Wizard magazine. So it's just
Huh.
like, we like that. We'll put it on there. Okay. So now the other thing that I just want to mention is the issue. In addition to, it's got like articles, got an interview with Jim. We'll quote a little bit of that in a bit. It's got some like different features, like, okay, he worked on X-Men. Here's a brief overview of that. Here's his Wildstorm universe. Here's his Homage Comics creator-owned line. All those types of things it's introducing, as well as some wizard goofiness, which we will definitely discuss shortly. But I think what a lot of people were probably buying it for at the time were the posters. Okay, so there are just a ton of posters in here, and again, all Jim Lee artwork, because if you weren't getting Jim Lee artwork, you'd be disappointed. But I just thought, like, we have the She Grifter here. What else do we have? There's just a little bit of Grifter, and then
That Wildcats 13 cover.
yeah, it is Savage Dragon cover he did for that month, where at the X month, where they all traded titles and stuff like that. So there's a lot of great stuff in there for somebody, the ones that I know. Christopher still has his in the poly bag. It's safe for his archives.
Yes. Well, the issue came. I should have gotten a copy out, but the issue came polybagged with a Wildstorm sampler and also a Wildstorm CCG card, which is why it's sealed in my collection. There's the sampler. You have the card. Who's the boss?
I have it somewhere, but I also have this thing too. The
Oh,
catalog.
cool.
Oh yes. Yeah, I love looking through that because the prices. I would buy all that stuff in a heartbeat at those.
Oh
events.
yeah, this is such a time capsule for like 1996. I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. Like,
Hold it all closer to your shirt, Christopher. We'll probably
the
see
plastic.
it there. Yeah, there we
There it
go.
is. Who's the
Yeah.
boss?
Okay, so Spartan and Zealot, cool.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things to get your attention, but most of all, I feel like it was just Jim Lee. That was the thing. People want to know more about the guy. How does he draw so well? What is the secret behind this guy? Which is, there's no tutorials in there from Jim Lee. There's none of that. But the thing that I wanted to bring up is when they interview Jim, they do ask him. They say, who is your favorite character to draw? And he starts out by declaring, surprisingly enough, it's not Grifter. I think Gen 13's Free Fall is the most fun to draw. She has the widest variety of poses available because of her personality and attitude. And so I just found that kind of fascinating that Free Fall is not necessarily even a character that he designed. J. Scott Campbell kind of brought that design to him, and yet he finds it the most interesting character in his whole universe of characters. So kind of fascinating there. So I wanted to ask you guys then, whether at Marvel, Image, or the DC years, what is your favorite Jim Lee character design? So it could be an existing character that he drew, or it could be one that he created. I'm curious to know, when you think of just like, either it's the quintessential design for you, like, oh, this is so Jim Lee, or I just love how he updated this type thing.
wow, that's a heavy ask.
There's so many, right?
Famous for this. Oh man.
I mean, I'll
I'm
mention
just gonna come
mine.
out and say it. Christy Blaze is my favorite Jim Lee character. Is
Oh,
my
okay.
favorite character overall. But my favorite Jim Lee character, which is why she's up here twice. And she's got the cigar, the 90s trope. She's a badass.
And I have to say, I am not familiar with her. Which book is she from?
Divine Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, a year after the magazine we're talking about, Jim comes hard, and he could have done anything, and he went completely into left field and pulled this out. And mixed reviews. It didn't end very strong, but it's still, the concept is still one of my favorites of all time, as far as what they did at Wildstorm.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, because we haven't covered that in the timeline yet. So I'm sure I will catch up and find out all about it. But why don't you tell the folks who are watching here and listening, how did you get this original piece of art by Jim Lee featuring that character?
So a few Super Bowls ago, Jim had a contest in his Discord channel, and he did some trivia questions. I think he was driving to a party and was trying to kill time. And I got the answer to one of the questions right, and the prize was supposed to be a signed Superman statue, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to complain about that. Couple months go by, I don't really hear anything. I reach out to him on Discord. He's like, "Yeah, I got you. A few months later, same thing. 20 months later, I'm like, "Jim, where's this statue?" I had seen him at Baltimore Comic-Con by then, but he wasn't going to travel with this thing. And he's like, "You know what?" He's like, it's too much hassle to pack up. I'm not going to see you in person. Why don't I just do a sketch for you? Okay, I'll take a sketch. He's like, "You like Christy Blaze? I'll do that." So that's what I mean. Like, Jim kind of knows who I am through the fandom. So he didn't ask me what I wanted. He's like, "I'll just draw you Christy Blaze." I was like, "Yes, please."
That's
and
awesome.
So,
Wow.
a month later that showed up at my door.
That's fantastic. Wow. Yeah, love to hear it. Love to hear it. Heck, Matt, has inspiration struck? Do you know who your favorite character design is?
Yeah, definitely Wolverine. Wolverine quickly became my favorite character once I got into X-Men, and definitely uh, Jim Lee's uh, Jim Lee's version of Wolverine was like the iconic Wolverine for me. Like, there's so many just like classic Wolverine images by him. So definitely his Wolverine was it for me.
Yeah, very striking. And just think of that X-Men #1 pose, right? Just that
Yeah,
the sideways
definitely.
profile look there. How about you, Andrew? Have we given you enough
Oh,
time?
I'm gonna give you three, and they're all X-Men characters. Okay, because I think these are like okay. I think Maverick is maybe a little overdone, but I just love Maverick's look so much. But I also feel like Jim Lee's kind of the only one who can actually do him justice. So I would put Maverick up there. I would put Omega Red. I think Omega Red is a perfectly designed villain. But I honestly think, and this, I don't even care about this character. I honestly think his Rogue is like the perfect encapsulation of Rogue. They still have not figured out a better look for Rogue. And I think that like when you think of Rogue, you think of Jim Lee's Rogue. Like that's what she looks like. I mean, and it's not just the cartoon. Like it's just carries over now so much. She's so perfect.
Yeah, it sounds like we're heavy on the X-Men here. And I will say for me, even though definitely not my favorite character in comics, Scott Summers, not somebody I want to read about, but his Cyclops,
Yeah.
like that is a character, like whenever I think of Jim Lee's name, immediately the wavy hair, because I always thought the Cyclops just looked skinny and kind of geeky with the hood and
He's
everything.
supposed to be. He's called Slim.
And so for me, though, it's just like now he's all buff, he's got straps, he's just like he looks so cool. And I don't know, like that one just like sticks out of my mind to the point where like we were recently on a recent episode, we were discussing that Toy Biz, I should say, Wizard was promoting it, but Toy Biz was giving away prototypes of their, like the mock-ups, the larger size prototypes. And one of them they were selling in the cheapest category was that Cyclops. And I was just like, I can't believe it. It's like one of the best figures they ever released. And so
Such a
now,
testament. It's such a testament to the quality of Jim Lee's work, because you think when X-Men #1 came out, some of those characters were just shy of hitting their 30-year mark. And to redesign those characters, and now we're 30 years on the other side of it, and that's still the look we associate with almost throughout across the board. It's incredible to think that that he did that, and that's the version that stuck.
yeah, let me see if I have it here in front of me. I do. Okay. So one of the things though, well, actually, I'll save this. I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to share this. But so we talked about Rob. Rob gets a lot of crap and it's kind of, overdone now, but over armored characters with small feet, too many pouches, crazy proportions. That's what you go to. Rob Liefeld, that was the 90s, blah, 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 blah. But Jim Lee also has a few quirks in his art, specifically from the 90s. And so I feel like that doesn't get called out as much. We're just like, oh, he's the consummate artist. He's perfect. We don't want to criticize Jim Lee. But if you could point out like a Jim Lee signature design choice that maybe you could do without, what do you think it would be? Like if you could say,
Wow.
he always puts this in, or he always draws this way, and I don't know why. So while you're thinking
got
about that,
I got one actually. I got
oh, you
one.
got it. Okay.
So on the cover, you will see there is a thing that he does with Fairchild's hair, and he and J. Scott Campbell started doing it at the same time. So I don't know who started it, but whoever did start it, the other one copied it. But they started putting these lines in here to to show the flare of the light hitting the color of their hair, and it's such a weird thing that like I specifically noticed it, and I was like, that's so weird. No one else does it except for these two guys in this one studio.
Hey, it's a signature. And so yeah, noticeable. This is the one that when we shared this online recently, this Wildcats X-Men poster, what everybody was going crazy about was Scott's choker here. So he has all the
Yeah.
straps, and for some reason for this, he added an extra choker on him there,
Huh.
one more strap around the throat, and everybody was just kind of like, what is going on there? Now, it wasn't like a regular thing he did, that was just like, that's why I think it stood out. But I think that is maybe people don't recognize how many straps his characters have on their wrists, on their boots, on their everything. And I think that is one thing where it does get excessive with some of the character designs occasionally. So I would just say, like, Jim, let's tone down the straps.
Yeah, it's definitely the difference, between graphic art and cartoony art. Like you just don't have time or economy of line to do that in cartooning. But when you're doing graphic art, and I think that's what is so compelling about Jim is he's not cartooning; he is doing graphic art. It gives you the allowance to put all those extra lines in there, but that's also can be very distracting from it's like you're trying to read through the story, you just keep poring over the same panel, picking out little details. It might be unnecessary, but they're there for eye candy.
Yeah. Matt, did anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I was flipping through the Millennium Edition here. When he was on Punisher War Journal, and I very much liked the Punisher, but I thought he overdid his costume a little bit, kind of along those lines. I think there were a few too many pouches and things like that and straps. I think like the Punisher should be as what's the word, trimmed down as possible, like minimalistic. It was a little too much going on here. And but one thing I just wanted to bring up, I was also looking at Gambit's costume, and like I'm amazed that that costume works because like you would think about it and it wouldn't. It's like the costume is like it's like maroon and blue with a brown trench coat over it. Like you wouldn't think that would work, but somehow it does.
Yeah, it is like a lot of strange components that go into Gambit.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Up to like, his little head, neck hood thing, whatever you call that,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I mean, he likes to throw in a lot of elements and always he's heavily influenced by military stuff. It just seems like very militaristic and uniform design and things like that, and gear and everything else. But Christopher, anything for you? You've obviously studied a lot of his art. What stands out to you most?
I have studied a lot, and this isn't something that I necessarily would say I would want to do without or I would want less of. But I notice, I guess maybe it's because of speed or just the ease of getting around the page, or maybe it just lends to the cinematic look that he gives to his comics. But a lot of his shots are very straightforward. When you look at characters, they're not that necessarily the panels are pinup panels, but you really get a lot of those straightforward shots as if you were watching it on the screen. And so there's if you look at guys like J. Scott Campbell, when he starts really getting in his groove and doing things like Danger Girl, or you look at Brett Booth and the way that he over dynamicizes, if that's a word, his poses. Jim's pretty much kind of somewhere in the middle. So you don't get a lot of variation, but what you get is incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could definitely see that to where it's very posed and very deliberate, and yeah, not frenetic. That's not his style at all.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, so we're talking a lot about Marvel, talking about the X-Men days, but his involvement in the founding of Image Comics was huge. I'm sure a major selling point for a lot of people. Yes, people wanted to follow McFarlane. Yes, they wanted to follow Liefeld. But Jim Lee's leaving Marvel, like he is Marvel at this time, basically. And so I think it's actually interesting, because we're coming up, or I should say we're in the 30th year, but we're coming up to the end of it. Like they just released the 30th anniversary thing the Wildstorm 30 book, which is a lot of fun. It's a great reunion. I'm a big Gen 13 fan, and that little 4 pages is all we got, but it's 100% what you would expect. Like, you're just like, that's what it should have been. So I thought that was great. But I'm curious for you, what was, because this might be hard for you, Christopher, but what was your favorite Wildstorm comic from that Image era? So pre DC buyout, like just, Wildcats and moving forward. Was there a book that you were devoted to? Is there a book that, caught your attention and you're just like, wow, I love what they're doing, whether it was Jim or not? Jim obviously was involved on some level.
It's still got to be Divine Right. It kind of straddles between, that it started at Image, DC buyout happens, and it kind of finishes at DC as an imprint, and it kind of feels rushed and stuff at the end. But when that book hit, it hit at a time when, Heroes Reborn had been done and the dust had kind of settled from that. And then Wildstorm kind of went into this really big relaunch with their New Horizons line. And Jim kind of headlined that with Divine Right. And it was just the mix of like mythology and technology, fused together. Just, it blew my mind. Like I flipping through those pages and I felt like I was the main character of that story. Like I was the guy that was on AOL talking, and my computer probably would blow up in my face and I could be a superhero, so that really hit at a time. And then right after that, the cliffhanger launch, with Battle Chasers and Danger Girl, just that was like the 1-2 punch for me, where I always had a foot in the door at Wildstorm. But when that happened, I was all in, and I've been all in ever since.
See, that's interesting, because I always thought Divine Right was just an event. Like, I thought it was like an event, and then there were crossovers and a few tie-in issues. I didn't realize it had that long a legacy. So
well,
that's fantastic.
It really doesn't, because we only got 12 issues plus 2 tie-in issues and like a preview and a Wizard 1/2.
Okay.
But if you look at the interviews when that stuff was launching, Jim's like, yeah, I'll be on the book for like the first 25 issues or so, and then I'll hand it off. And it was supposed to be this very long, drawn out, ongoing comic. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. But for me, the concept is strong enough that it overshadows what we actually got. And I can kind of see past that. I can fill in the gaps with my imagination. And, if you put that concept in today with the way the technology has advanced, and you think about all the different people that you can reach on the internet with the snap of a finger, I mean, that story just blows up. I think it would be incredible to see that come back. But yeah, that's definitely number 1 for me, is Divine Right.
Okay. Andrew, what was on your
Boy,
mind?
I'm a Wildcats junkie. I love Wildcats. I've always loved Wildcats. I think that they're so. I think every character is great. I know a lot of people think Warblade is just a rip-off Wolverine character. I don't. I think Warblade's got character. I think Maul is awesome. I love Stormwatch, man. I think Stormwatch is great. I love the first 20 issues of Wetworks. But I'll tell you honestly, like, my favorite books are those weird ones that no one cares about. I love Brass. I love Union. Like, I love all these characters that, like, we'll probably never see again. But I love them so much because I feel like they're like, a lot of them are created by people or written and drawn by people who are like, I want to be a part of this Wildstorm studio, and this studio is going to drive me to do my best. So when you look at Brass, like, there's nothing that looks like Brass at all. We can argue that maybe the story's not incredible, but like, those guys were pushing themselves super hard. When you look at anything Aaron Wiesenfeld did for Wildstorm, there's no American comics looking like that. So like, I don't know, man. Like, it's hard for me to pick a favorite, but I think it's just, I just love the studio because they just pushed everybody pushed so hard to make themselves better.
Nice. Okay. Matt.
Brass is incredible.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
If everybody has the chance and you can find the oversized folio edition of Brass #1, it's one of the most gorgeous comics I've seen. And it came out at a time when they weren't doing those big artist editions and things like that. This book is huge, and it's so detailed on the inside. You just get transported into that world immediately. Yeah. I highly recommend that book.
3 issues are the first mini, and then I think there's 6 of the second mini.
Yes.
And they're both great. John Arcudi wrote the second book. It's fantastic.
And Matt, what about you?
In general, like, none of the Wildstorm titles really grabbed me that much. I bought a trade paperback of the first 4 issues of Wildcats, and I'm sure I loved the art, but I don't think the characters really grabbed me. Like I didn't continue past that. I would say the one exception would be Battle Chasers from Joe Mad. I got really into Battle Chasers, and I remember, you guys might remember too, it very like rarely came out. It was like once or twice a year or something. And I remember there was like a cliffhanger message board online, and every day after school I would log on there, and everybody would be talking about, well, Battle Chasers. A lot of it was Battle Chasers, and a lot of the topic of discussion was like, when is Battle Chasers coming out? When's the next issue came out? But one thing was, though, because it came out so rarely, like every time it came out it was kind of an event, like. And
It was a
there's like
return to the original Image release schedule. Okay.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, good point.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Now, I obviously it really has to be obvious to anybody who's listened to the podcast ever that Gen 13 is my number one book. Like that was the only like Wildstorm book that I bought consistently. Like I might, I bought DV8 for a little bit just because it was a spinoff from Gen 13, and I'd buy things here and there. Like even recently, I picked up like a big stack of Stormwatch, like just like the first 25 issues or something like that. And I was reading through it and I'm like, it's a little too sterile for me. It's a little too, again, military team, like G.I. Joe with superpowers is kind of how it felt to me. And so I was kind of like, I don't know, it doesn't connect for me. But like the fun and wackiness of Gen 13, for all its fault for like plot and story, like there's nothing there in the mythology that really matters, but every issue you were going to get a laugh. You were just going to have some fun with these characters being ridiculous in the moment, and so like I do have to say too, like, because we haven't, this is a Jim Lee tribute, but his collaboration obviously with Brandon Choi, childhood friend, and like I love Brandon's writing. Like the books that he was involved in do stand out to me, to say like, okay, he was a solid storyteller, and he was able to translate a lot of these ideas that they put together in a way that worked. So I did want to ask one more question for you, Andrew, though, because in the Wildstorm 30, the 30th anniversary special,
Yeah.
the thing that stood out to me is the Wildcats story basically points out the fact that we were all over the place with this book. Like every
Yeah.
era, every creative team took it in a totally new direction. So do you have a preference for a specific creative team for Wildcats?
Wow. I mean, if I will say that I think pound for pound, I think Wildcats 6, 7, and 8 are probably the best individual issues art wise of that. Well, let's say 5 through 8, that whole Killer Instinct thing, I think are probably the best art pound for pound, especially Jim Lee. But man, as a run, I don't know. I think James Robinson and Travis Charest really did some impressive work on, like, I think they start on 15 through like 20-ish, and then Alan Moore takes over. And I would say Alan Moore, but I feel like the art is really lopsided on that because Charest just couldn't stick to the schedule. But I think when they do have him drawn, those are some of the best issues of the book. But I will say, honestly, I'm really like the weird run around issue like 40 that's Jonathan Peterson and Matt Brahm, because I think Matt Brahm really gets those characters, and he's kind of an underrated artist. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but I would say it's much better than people remember it to be.
Okay, that's cool. All right. Yeah, like I say, because whenever I'm in the back issue bins and I'm like, there's a long run of Wildcats, I'm just like, wow, I can't believe how many people worked on this book and really just gave it their own stamp. So now, Christopher, I want to ask you a question, because obviously I invited you on here specifically because you are, a super fan of the Wildstorm universe. And I'm just curious for you, like, what was it, about Wildstorm, as, just a collection of characters and stories and concepts and merchandise and everything else that made you want to put together a website and then like archive, all the published output, the different things that were part of the imprint. Like, what is it, would you say, is like the thing that excites you most about it?
There's a couple reasons why I chose Wildstorm as my hobby. First of all, Wildstorm is kind of, for me, it's like, it's an energy. It's not just a group of characters, it's not just stories, it's not just the creators, it's not the studio, it's kind of this big jumble of all this stuff where they always wanted to be doing the next thing before everybody else, and that's really what it felt like. And even today, the 30th anniversary book, the new relaunch of Wildcats, we're getting Waller versus Wildstorm, which is a Black Label book. It got delayed, so I don't think it's coming out now till February. But it feels like there's just an energy about that for me when I see that stuff. In a way that other stuff, not that it doesn't do that, it's just somehow Wildstorm was able to grab a hold of me at a time when I was ready to be grabbed by something. Fast forward to now, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I have 4 kids, and so I have my time is limited. My money is severely limited. And so I wanted to do one thing, and I wanted to do it as well as I possibly could. So I went down the list. I made a pros and cons list because that's the kind of guy I am. And I thought, okay, what are all these things that excite me? What can I manage, and what is off the table? And as I started crossing off the list, the one thing that constantly was there was Wildstorm. And I was like, this is the thing I'm going to get into. And so for the past 5 years, my only hobby really has been just putting together the best Wildstorm collection I can, and reminding everybody out there that this stuff is awesome, that they really did something for everybody. And once you kind of grab onto one thing, it's like chain lightning. Like, you find the next thing, and then the next thing, and then you realize, wow, they did everything, and everybody's worked for Wildstorm. So that's really how I got into it.
Okay,
And why
well,
I'm
that's
still here
great.
after all this time.
Yeah, like I have to ask though right now, because we have a public forum here, people that are going to check in. Oh, we always like to help each other, right? Comic book fans. So is there like whether not a holy grail item necessarily, but a specific something that you are trying to track down? It exists, you just haven't found it yet, that you want to put the the word out right now. People get it.
There are a few things on my list. I hesitate to tell anybody what they are.
That's a good point. Don't want to create the
people out there that are
competition.
going to be looking for the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I collect uncut sheets of cards. I collect the snowboards. I have 2 Jim Lee snowboards that I don't know if I can get to them right now. They're kind of tucked away. They're both Deathblow. I have hats. I have a lunchbox. I have graded comics. I have the original art. I'm kind of all over the place. Which is good, because I never feel like I'm just doing one thing, or I'm only trying to track one last thing down. I can kind of jump around and kind of curate my collection that way. But yeah, I'm looking for all that kind of stuff. Specifically though, I think I'm gonna hold off on that just in case.
That's fair. That's fair.
Geeks, it's time to take a break to tell you about our sponsor for this episode, Manscaped. Yes, Manscaped, offering the best in men's below-the-waist grooming with their precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Psst, that means your balls.
It's 2023, and that means it's time for you to reboot your personal hygiene routine by using this exclusive offer from Manscaped just for our listeners of the Wizards Podcast Guide to Comics. You'll get 20% off and free international shipping. That means you in Canada also, by using this promo code WIZARDS20 at checkout. When you're shopping for great Manscaped products like the Performance Package 4.0.
Yes, like you said, Michael, it's a new year that'll be full of new experiences as you take your grooming game to the next level with Manscaped's innovative tools like the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer. So, Michael, I gifted my dad the Weed Whacker for Christmas, and he is now singing its praises. Okay, he had a run-of-the-mill nose hair trimmer he said he liked, he'd been using it for years. But now, because of the Weed Whacker and the fact that it's waterproof, it features Manscaped's proprietary skin-safe technology. He's enjoying the comfort of reduced nicks and snags and tugs. And when he's cleaning up, the old schnoz there. You're welcome, Dad. But Michael, how has Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0 been improving your lifestyle?
So, in addition to using the Weed Whacker, which I used this morning, funny enough, as you just mentioned, which I love, and it's fantastic. I've used several different nose hair things, and they always nick and pull, and it's a pain. I'm continuing to use the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer on my head, which really, it's unbelievable. It works fantastic. keeps my head super smooth thanks to the advanced skin safe technology. Plus, the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and Crop Reviver Toner are a nice way to stay fresh during my daily activities. And you know what? Having that shed travel bag to hold everything is fantastic. I have a nice, easy place to put all my stuff so my wife's not complaining that it's all over the counter and everything else in our bathroom. So, Adam, what about you? How has Manscaped been helping your life?
Well, see, my family gifted me tons of Manscaped products for Christmas. Like, I got the ultra premium body wash, okay, which is infused with aloe vera and sea salt. Keeps my skin fresh and moisturized. Plus, it actually smells great. It's got this woodsy scent. It's bergamot and lavender, and I have no idea what bergamot is, but it's working for me.
But it's
okay?
delightful.
Yeah. I'm also digging, they have the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, which has coconut water, green tea, aloe, turmeric, and sage. And it's
turmeric for
oh,
you.
turmeric. See, again, I don't
Turmeric.
know these things. I'm not fancy enough to be using Manscaped.
You got to be a
I'm getting
hipster from
there.
Brooklyn like me. You got to know.
But the cool thing about that mixture is it's naturally hydrating, and that's the thing I notice is just my skin actually feels good after I use it. It's not all dried out, gross. Plus, their ultra premium deodorant is great too because it's all clear, it's aluminum free, and it doesn't leave like marks or odors on your clothes. And most of all, I would say it doesn't enhance the stank. I don't know if you've had that experience, Michael, of deodorants that actually make you smell worse throughout the day. Have you ever had that? I'm just like,
Yeah,
what
they say they're like, oh, it's 48-hour protection, but by hour 4, it's like radiating odor. I'm like,
and then I go for an antiperspirant instead, and then I just sweat all over. So like, this is like the perfect middle ground. Okay.
you saying the word antiperspirant really makes me laugh.
Yeah.
I love that your family gifted you stuff using our promo code. That's hilarious.
I said, now's the time, guys. Get a great deal for your Christmas shopping.
Absolutely. One of my very close friends, I gifted him the Lawnmower 4.0 for Christmas. And I reached out to his wife first and I said, is it okay if I get this for your husband? And she goes, please do. No one needs it more. So I gave it to him for Christmas, and he's called me up and he's like, dude, this thing is incredible. And my wife is thrilled that she's not looking at a mountain of mess down there. And his wife even thanked me too. Which is kind of weird, but it's cool. I like it. So it's time to up your grooming game in 2023. Like 7 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped to take care of their balls with the Performance Package 4.0 that includes the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, the Crop Reviver toner, plus 2 free gifts, the Performance boxer briefs, which I use all the time and I wear them great. They're very, very comfortable. And the Shed travel bag to hold your gear. Best of all, you get 20% off your order and free international shipping. Manscaped, the best for men's grooming. Now back to the show.
So now let's get back to Jim's career here. So obviously, as he becomes more of an executive, with his own imprint with Wildstorm, kind of less and less frequent the Jim Lee art, right? Until he's like inspired, excited about a certain project, then he kind of jumps into it. And then of course, the big sale to DC Comics kind of caught everybody by surprise. We're like, this is happening. Whoa, I can't believe it. Bye-bye, Jim. And so he heads over there. And obviously, like a few years later, we get kind of this, it feels like the instant classic that is Hush, this Jim Lee drawing Batman. And everybody's like, oh, I can't believe it. This is amazing. And then again, it seems like slower and slower is the Jim Lee released art that we all desperately want, but that's not where he's at now. He's a major executive for DC now. So the question I have is this: like, a lot of the Wildstorm universe, like, there are bits and pieces that come back, right, that they kind of cycle in and out and are reappearing. But for you guys, is there a character or a title that you wish DC would bring back? I mean, Christopher, I think we know your answer, but but just like in your mind, is there something you feel like has been kind of put aside could come back just if there was the right creative team. But you just feel like this is a concept people need to bring it back again, whether it's a Jim Lee creation or just Wildstorm in general. You'd love to see maybe these people in the 30th anniversary special showed, hey, it could happen.
I mean, I feel like they keep trying. And I've like Christopher and I are in a Facebook group that is just full of people. Just I don't want them in. I don't want these characters in the DCU. I don't want them. And I personally agree with that. I don't think that it makes sense if you think about what the Wildstorm universe was grounded in, this weird paranoia and stuff. I don't think it makes sense next to Superman. It's like I don't mind it, but what I think the characters are better served in their own pocket universe. Having said that, they keep trying to bring back Stormwatch. I think that there is a really cool way you could do Stormwatch with the original characters. The one book that I think never really got the love it deserved was Union. I think there's a lot you could do with that because it's sort of like Jim's take on Green Lantern, kind of. But it's got its own sort of space opera kind of thing going on there that they just never really got back to. And I should have said when we were talking about character designs, I think the Union character is one of Jim's absolute best designs. I think it's pretty much flawless. So like if they could find a way to bring that character back and do something great with him, I think that would be awesome.
So was Mark Sixera just the artist on that then?
Yeah.
Wasn't okay. I thought that was like a creator own thing for him. I didn't realize that.
No, that was Jim. Jim and I think Jim, I don't know if he was ever going to draw it, but he definitely designed it and created that character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt, did you have anybody that came to mind when we brought that up? Or just I'm going to expand it to say also on this side, who is a character you wish Jim Lee would draw that he has not yet? Like if you saw Jim Lee's version of this character in in an arc, who would you want him to draw? So we can come back around on that. But
well, I'll go with in reference to the first question. I can't really think of much. I honestly I was disappointed when he became like DC exclusive because I was like, oh, he's never going to do X-Men again. Like, honestly, I want to see him do X-Men again. Like, I was never really into DC, so his DC stuff didn't really interest me that much. And the Wildstorm characters didn't interest me that much. So, I mean, really, I like him because of his Marvel stuff. And I wish at some point before he retires, just once, he could do some X-Men related thing. I don't know if it's going to be possible, but that's what I would really like to see.
I don't know if Disney buys DC and then it just becomes Disney Comics. You never know.
Rob Liefeld seems to think that Jim Lee's going to be out of DC within the next year, so we'll see. I will say, if he does leave DC, I think, Matt, you're going to be very happy with what happens. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but if he does, I think everyone involved in comics would be fools to not move heaven and earth to get him drawing X-Men again.
Yeah. They need some help.
Yeah.
On the second question, Christopher, did you have anybody that, like, again, a character? Because I see you have a Joker in the background. Obviously, he's drawn Batman. He's done that universe, but is there somebody else?
You know what? I'm going to give a different answer here, I think.
Okay.
I want to see Jim come out and do something new again, just completely from scratch. I know he's got stuff in the tank that creative mind doesn't go away when you're an executive. I bet he has a concept and he has an idea, and it's just a matter of where's he going to get the most mileage out of it. I don't think he wants to give it to DC. I think he's very happy with what he does at DC. But if that dynamic were to change and he were to have a chance to do something else, I think we would see one last creator-owned project from him. And it could be anything. I love his mind. I love the way he kind of thinks and breaks stuff down, the way he designs things, his storytelling ability. So I just want to see something completely brand new and fresh, just like one last hurrah before he rides out into the sunset.
I know what I want him to do. I want them to redo Deathmate. I want them to redo Deathmate with the new Valiant universe and whatever characters they're down for Image. I want them to redo Deathmate. I think Deathmate Black is a great book.
That would be cool.
So that's what I want.
Yeah, Matt.
If we're given that type of answer, I want to see Jim Lee's TMNT come
There
back
you
for a
go.
little
Yeah,
4-issue
yeah.
miniseries.
Yeah,
Actually,
especially
that reminded me of something he did for Wildstorm. I totally forgot about it. I thought was really cool was the Death Blow issues he did.
of course. Yeah.
Um, those were great. I totally forgot about those.
If he did TMNT in that style, get out of town. Get out of town. Game over.
So, and you know, as far as you know, a Wildstorm characters that I wish they could, you know, resurrect and do right, it would be Gen 13, but they've tried so many times, and I just think it's so of the moment that
Yeah.
like to try to bring it back, you have to do what they did as basically a joke in that 30th anniversary special, which is if Gen 13 had just been launched right now, what would those characters be doing, right? Like who would they be in our modern 21st century world? And I thought it was like fantastic. But yeah, just you have to capture the zeitgeist. I don't know if that would work, but who I want to see Jim Lee draw is, you know, one of my favorite books of the 90s was Spider-Man 2099.
Oh yeah. That'd be
Rick
cool.
Leonardi's great, but imagine what Jim Lee would have done. Just all the tech in that world and everything,
Yeah.
just be amazing.
You know what? Oh, that just made me think. I think he could do some really cool stuff with either Aliens or Predator as well.
Ooh, yeah.
I think he could do
Yeah.
something really, really cool with that, with the military tech and the weird sci-fi elements of it. But I think one of the things that's really cool about Jim is he does a really great job of taking fantastic elements or futuristic elements and grounding them in reality.
Mhm.
I think Will Spartasio is also really, really good at that. I think that's probably one of the things that their studio was, when they were working together, really bonded over. And I would love to see him draw, not necessarily Arnold Schwarzenegger, but like somebody fighting the Predator in the jungle. I think Jim would crush that.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, now we're gonna get into this next bit that I teased at the beginning with Wizard has to be Wizard, okay? Because a lot of the stuff here in this special they actually just took from previous issues of Wizard, and they're like, here's an article we wrote about it. Here's this and here's, and they kind of dropped it in, and then but they you know they have original stuff too. But when they get original, they get really original. Okay, so I'm gonna share this with you right here. So what we have here is All in the Family.
Oh, geez.
Okay. So what Wizard has decided to do, right, is they are bringing all the famous Lees of pop culture, and they want to say everybody's a Lee. If you're a Lee, you're definitely connected. And so my question to you guys is, if not Jim Lee, which of these Lees would be your favorite?
Oh man, I gotta go Spike Lee, I think.
Connected back to that Malcolm X hat.
Yeah, the Malcolm X hat.
I mean, well, I'll say at least like when I was a kid, Jim Lee, Stan Lee, and Bruce Lee were like the trifecta of people I loved. Like I loved all three of those dudes. So I'm gonna go with all three of them.
Okay, as one Super Lee. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go with Christopher Lee. I feel like he's done so much in the time that he had, and you know, his footprint in cinema is still being felt with the roles that he did and the things that he defined in those roles.
Yeah. For sure, Christopher Lee. Wow. I mean, for me, just thinking of as a kid, just pure nostalgia factor, it's got to be the General Lee. I mean, because I'm not a huge fan of the Stars and Bars on top of it, but for me, like just the whole concept of what the Dukes were about, like they were just the heroes to me as a kid, and every orange Matchbox car or Hot Wheel that I got just became the General Lee. Like it just, and how many times have I wanted, I can't believe in my life I haven't done it yet, just to roll down the windows and slide in, you know, through through the window there to the driver's seat. So all right. Well, you guys can tell us on social media, those of you who are watching, and on YouTube in the comments below. As we close out here, the question that I just have for you is, as you think back on Jim Lee and what you have interacted with for his output and his art, is there anything we have not discussed that you feel needs to be brought up? Is there something that you're just like, you know, this is the essence of Jim Lee for me, or his impact on the industry, or anything of that nature? Just want to open the floor to you guys.
Well, I have a sort of like I think underrated Jim Lee thing that came out
Oh.
like in the mid-90s at some point. There was a Wildcats and X-Men crossover miniseries and he drew one of the installments. Here's the cover. It's Wildcats X-Men: The Silver Age, and it's Grifter, Jean Grey, Nick Fury, the Brood. It took place, I guess, in the '60s, and it was a really cool issue. He drew the whole thing. Um, and actually the whole mini series was good, but this is something that's definitely worth tracking down, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So
Yeah, it's true. There were a lot of crossovers at this time with Jim Lee characters, but he wasn't always, drawing them. So it's kind of like he'd usually a lot of times, right? Like Jim Lee drawing this thing. Okay, he's drawing a few pages and everybody else is filling in, right? It was kind of
yeah,
how that would
or
work.
the cover or something.
Yeah. All right. Andrew?
This is a slightly cynical take, and I don't really like cynicism in general, but I will say I do think Jim Lee is a world-class artist, one of the best of the 90s, but I honestly think his true talent is nothing to do with what he's doing on the artboard. I do think it's his, I don't want to say gamesmanship, but his understanding of the industry and how to do what he wants and get what he wants out of the industry and climb in the ranks of the industry. I think honestly that's even more impressive than his art. Frankly, I think his art is lost because he's so busy engaging in that sort of thing. And I think frankly we're all a little poorer because of that. I think we all wish I could care less what kind of moves he's doing as an executive at DC. I want to see him drawing the Wildcats, but I do think that if when I look at the art he's drawing now, it does not honestly inspire me as much as what I see from 30 years ago. And I think that's because he's so invested in carrying on his business that the art is suffering a little bit, to be honest.
He might still be burned out from 30 years ago. I mean,
right.
he
went so hard,
into the the 90s, and then it's just like, oh, how much more can I give?
And I will say to me the best legacy that he did have was creating Wildstorm Studios and giving a place to all these artists. And Rob did this, and Mark Silvestri did this, where it's like they're each learning from each other. They're each spending time in the studio, watching each other draw and learning how to do certain things. And then you've got all these artists that are blowing up out of there. I mean, Brett Booth is doing great stuff, and there's still plenty of people who are still in the industry. Frankly, I wish more of those guys were still in the industry, because there's a lot of people that were doing great stuff. And that's what I will always remember him for, is creating this universe that allowed this studio to flourish.
That's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, seeding that young talent for the future. We got to enjoy them, for as long as we did. But now, Christopher, I'm sure you have a million things going through your head right now, but you are, again, very active in the fandom. Is there an association that Jim has with the fans that you would like to shout out, that you can kind of fill in the folks that aren't as deep into it?
I think Jim's best quality is his memory and his ability to act on his memory. So if you're a fan and you've interacted with Jim, if you've seen him at a convention, or you're in his Discord channel, or you watch him live on Twitch, or however it is that you interact with him, he remembers you. And when you see him at a con, he makes it personal. And I could be just anybody. I am just anybody. I'm one of 8 billion people on the planet, but I can walk up and shake Jim's hand at a convention, and he'll remember my name, or at least he'll remember something about me. Who I am, without having to, hey, my name is Chris, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's one of his biggest strengths is he pours so much back into the fans. And I think, not being tied down to that table, drawing table 8, 10, 12 hours a day gives him the ability to go out and do more of that stuff. And again, as he's getting later and later into his career, that time's going to come to a close soon. So I would suggest if you have the ability, if Jim's in your town or the next town or the next state over, or you just want to drop all your money and go to San Diego Comic-Con one year, do it. Meet Jim. It's an experience, and you won't forget it, and he won't forget it.
That is so cool. Like, honestly, like, I have thought he's just been up in an office building all these years. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never imagined like Jim Lee is still out and about doing it, because it feels like, well, he's corporate now. What does he need to promote? He's not really, promoting his own comics he's trying to sell. But that's so wonderful that he's giving back to the fans in that way. Because when you look again at the legacy, I mean, he was the one to do it. No one has beat his sales record, which is not what comics are about. But I mean, there's a reason for that, right? And we'll never see that again. He is one of the people who, like, I think just the most like imitated for people that I knew growing up. Everybody wanted to draw like Jim Lee. Like everybody was just like, okay, I figured it out. I figured it out. I could do it. And so I just, for the 90s nostalgia in all of us, I think definitely he solidifies so much. There, like we say, there are other people in the Image camp and former Marvel, superstars who maybe get a lot more attention for bad things, but he was certainly the pinnacle of it all. And going back just to the poker analogy, and like you were saying, Andrew, when I watch him, it was the same with Image launch, right? Okay, Youngblood's going to come out first. Spawn's going to come out. He's going to take his time. He's going to see what they're doing wrong. Okay, now here's Wildcats, and then same with everything that has gone on his career. He's like, okay, I'm not going to be the first necessarily. I'm going to be innovative, but I'm going to see what's happening. And then pushing it out there. So I think it's fascinating to watch all that he has accomplished. And of course, who knows, like you say, Christopher, one of these days, if he gets that creator-owned project out there and we're just like, oh, I can't believe, he's been holding on to this all these years. This is amazing. That's kind of my hope with Joe Quesada leaving Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
All these guys kind of going back, like, are we going to see the Renaissance now 30 years later? They're all the creator-owned stuff coming back in the way that was making the 90s so exciting in the early part of that decade. So as we close out here, guys, last thing, I just want to have a little bit of fun and we'll see how this goes. Christopher, you are a trivia winner, so we're going to see if we can match you here. Wizard put together what they were calling their CBIQ, their comic book intelligence quiz. If you guys remember, those would be in every issue. And again, it's something we don't cover very often because we don't have time, and all the trivia might make some of us look foolish on the podcast. So we're like, maybe when we get somebody who knows their stuff. So what I just want to do here, I want to offer up a Jim Lee prize pack. Now, depending on who's winning, they might already have these things. First up, I'm just going to say, so we are going to offer here one of our Wizard stickers because you got to spread the word, right? But also we have a couple Jim Lee related Wizard cards. So we have this Deathmate Topps promo card. Okay?
Yeah.
We have half of the Kindred card set. So we have Backlash there. Okay, these things that came with Wizard Magazine. Then there's your Cole Cash Chromium card. Okay, so it's Team 7 look. And also a couple comics. Now, we've talked about it. Everybody's got a copy, but what's one more? Okay, so how about X-Men #1, the one that is so essential if you're going to talk about Jim Lee in the 90s. But also, how about Wildcat Zero? Okay.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Jim Lee art in here, but certainly his creations. Okay. It's a nice wraparound cover. So that's a real fun piece. And then last one here, we saw the poster, a little bit of it anyway. So the first issue of Grifter She, which is a fun crossover as well. So get those, get the cards if you can answer the questions correctly. So I'm gonna do my best to keep score and everything, and you guys could just keep me on my toes. But I'm gonna drop in because this is a visual CBIQ, although I personally think they should have called it the Lee BIQ.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
It's right there.
How'd they miss that pun? All right, so first one here, you can just say your name. Magneto killed which character in Cold Blood? Let's go back to the X-Men days.
I'm not gonna know this one.
Should we like just say an
All you
answer?
guys.
Yeah, just say your name and then say the letter.
Matt C.
Correct. Good job. All right. You've been praising the X-Men side of Jim Lee all night. Okay. Who is Fairchild's father?
On. Andrew, that's C. That's Alex Fairchild. Come
Very
on.
good. Very good. Okay. Who did the U.S. government pick to briefly replace Henry Bendix as Weatherman 1?
I know this one too.
Okay.
That's
Go for
B.
it.
Christine Trelane, aka Synergy.
Correct. I actually just found out about that by reading that Wildstorm special. Okay. Who is Reno Bryce? Secret identity.
I'm gonna know all these Wildstorm ones, so I don't want to
Go for it.
dominate the conversation.
Do
here.
it.
Go for it.
That's B. Warblade.
Very good. Okay. The X-Men villain who brought Colossus out of his amnesia was.
Was it B, the Shadow King?
I think it
Correct.
was.
Wow.
Mirror Island Saga, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good work. This is going to be a battle. It just depends on how much X-Men and how much Wildstorm, right?
I'm sitting back and I want to see these two guys
Chris,
duel it out here.
You know the answer to this one, Chris?
Yeah, who is not a member of Team 1?
I think I know the answer, but I think this might be a trick question. Chris, do you know the answer to this?
I'm thinking. It's been a while since I read Team 1.
This is the stumper. Okay.
I know. I know what they're. I think I know what they're asking here, but so okay. Can I just answer
Go
here?
for it,
Yeah,
Andrew.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. So the answer is D, Zealot. But
Correct.
I think that B and D are actually both the same character, and I can't. Yeah, I think that's Lucy. Is it Lucy Blaze? I think was the character B, and I think that was just Zealot back in the 50s. But I don't know. Wildstorm listeners who are Wildstorm fans, please let me know because my memory's not great.
The leader of Kindred is.
Is it D?
No,
No, it's not Pike. It's A, Blood Moon.
Correct. Okay, Blood Moon. Look at that. That's actually kind of like a. Does that look like Dark Claw? It kind of has a Dark Claw.
It kind of
look.
does.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Here we go. Which Wildcats member left the team when the group left for Caribou?
I think it's Grifter. Yeah. It's
Correct.
Grifter. Yeah.
Very good. All right, here we go. Number 9. Who was responsible for Stormwatch's destruction?
That's B. That's Deathbit, and that's part of the Images of Tomorrow weird event that they did, which I thought was such a cool idea.
Number 10. Union's main squeeze is.
Oh, I know this one too. That's Jill, letter A.
Correct. All right, good. Here we go. Who was not taught in the ways of the Coda?
B.
There you go.
Very good. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Boyd. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Which X-Man went through the siege perilous and became a Genosian magistrate?
A.
Yeah, there you
Very
go.
good. All right.
Those are some great Jim Lee issues of X-Men. too.
Yeah,
That Extinction.
They
of the-
were.
Jim drew the hell out of those. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 13. Which of the following Wildcats is human?
Is there only one answer?
It says there is only one answer. The most human, perhaps?
Interesting.
There's only one that's fully human. The other three are full
Other.
half or
A.
Or other. Yeah.
A.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's Grifter. Grifter. Again.
Grifter. All right. Who
Hmm.
helped expose Team 7 to the Gen Factor that gave them their powers?
A.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's Miles Craven, letter C. One
Yeah.
of the big bads of the Wildstorm universe.
Behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
He's just in
Mhm.
everything. Backlash's daughter is none other than.
That's B, Jet. But I didn't realize she was around back then.
Well,
she was Crimson then.
She was
Oh, yeah.
Crimson then. Yeah.
This is interesting because Wizard wrote it down incorrectly then. For some reason, they said it was taboo, and that would be awkward.
That would be
Very
real
awkward.
Number 16, who is responsible for transforming Psylocke into the deadly Asian ninja master she is today?
It was D.
Correct. Good work.
Who is C? Who is that character?
No idea.
Wow.
Kind of looks like Silvestri art, though. I don't know. Is that Jim
Yeah.
Lee? I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, so this answer has been retconned out.
Oh,
But the answer is D, Savant.
yes.
But it was retconned in like 2000, let's say 6-ish, where they retconned her where now she is actually her daughter that she raised as her own sister.
Oh, okay. Very clever. All right. Which character can see and exercise Daemonites that possess human beings?
Oh, A.
Very good. All right. If
I
you
do-
just read the first issue, right?
Yes.
That's a heck of a joke, though. That's a good
Oh,
joke.
Richard Simmons. my
That's a good
goodness.
joke.
Look how young he looks too.
I know.
He's looking pretty suave. I thought it was Billy Joel for a second. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? So the Justice Stone empowers which character?
Oh, that's my boy Union. Letter
Yeah.
C.
With whom did Magneto have a romantic fling in the Savage Land?
B.
You got it, Matt. All right.
And that's Jim Lee art on that one too.
Yeah. That was the Zabu.
Oh,
Oh,
man.
that's pretty good. All right. So that was fun. And that was yeah, just it's interesting. The I feel like Zealot was like the most featured possibility in all of those. You just kept putting Zealot everywhere. Like, is it Zealot? And it never was Zealot.
Yeah.
The true red herring. But I think as I have done the tally here, Matt, you gave it a valiant effort. Christopher sat back. Yes, very good.
I sat back because you sent over scans of the magazine for me to look at ahead
I
of time,
forgot.
and
yeah.
I did the whole thing this morning. So I
There
felt
you
like
go.
that would not be fair.
Very, very honest of you. So, but as the tally came together, just with the overwhelming majority of Wildstorm trivia that they put in there, Andrew is our winner.
Oh,
So congratulations.
Thank you.
But gentlemen, I just want to thank you for coming on. This was a fun conversation. I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things that it really felt like just a bunch of people at a comic shop talking about Jim Lee. And that's how it should be. That's
Yeah.
what it is about. Just having fun, just enjoying the things you enjoy and spreading that out, teaching your friends a few things they didn't know before. So, but I did just want to give you guys a chance as well. You know, like I'm going to count you as official guests here on Wizard. So is there anything that you would like to share with the people that are watching if they want to have more conversations with you? Where can they find you?
So all my socials are at Andrew Sahak. That's spelled ANDREWCAHAK. I have a podcast about silly new metal albums from the 90s called Life Was Peachy. That's very fun and silly, and if you like dumb music from 30 years ago, it's a good listen. I actually worked on a book that a lot of fans of this podcast might enjoy called Darkest Image. There's 2 volumes of this. It's a tribute to 90s Image Comics. I've done a couple stories with Milo Trent in each of the volumes. They're like 300-page volumes. There's 2 of them. You can get a digital copy for $5. You can buy a print copy. And all the profits are donated to William Messner Loebs, which is super cool. You can find that at imagegranddesign.com if you want the digital version. If you want to get a print copy, and there's not many left, so if you want it, you got to get it soon. You can go to marcosis6studios.bigcartel.com. And there's links to that at andrewsahak.com. So check that out. They're super cool books about an era of Image Comics that I think all of us on this podcast probably have a lot of love for.
Very, very cool. And Matt, if people want to find you online and say hi, where are you at?
I'm on Instagram at Eddie-Brock77. That's how I managed to grab the Eddie Brock name. So you can follow me on there.
Great. And of course, Christopher, if people want to check out those archives, where can they find you?
The archive is a work in progress, but it's at worldofwildstorm.com. There is a lot of good content up there right now, trading cards and comic checklists. It's still a work in progress. It's a lot to try to organize this stuff, and it's a lot to find the time to dedicate to sit down at the computer and do it. But I will be working on that throughout the year. You can also find me on your favorite social media at WildStormsCCG.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely a good follow. And now I will say that as part of all this and the release of this particular event for all of you to enjoy, we also have an interview on the Wizard Files with a very important member of the Wildstorm staff, Jeff Marriott, who was
cool.
the VP of marketing in addition to writing many Image books. And yeah, he was just all over the place. He told some fantastic stories. If you don't know how he got hired to work at Wildstorm, it's a fascinating story. So make sure that you check that out. You can go to wizardscomics.com where you have our archive of over 180 odd episodes to enjoy there. A lot of them are Wizard Files interviews with staff members of Wizard Magazine, with comics pros who were featured heavily. And so you can check that out. Be sure to get in touch with us if you're not already connected at Wizards Comics on Twitter, at Wizards_Comics on Instagram, our YouTube channel. Subscribe the Wizards Podcast YouTube channel. And one more plug for the Patreon. Wizards, the Patreon Guide to Comics, is active. It is rolling along, and you are getting all sorts of episodes unedited. They are ready to go 2 weeks early. As soon as we record them, you're getting them, as well as a lot of other exclusive content behind the scenes. And you may even influence the episodes as they go forward as we reach out to our patrons. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for listening or watching. And until next time, keep your books bagged and boarded.